Human beings have an intense craving, often unfulfilled, to be understood by someone else. Hi, my name is Eric Peng. I've read 1,000 books and connected 6,000 of my top learnings in this digital notebook. We're going to take a look at Kottler's quote, ask a few questions about it, connect it with my notebook, and see what we can learn. Let's go. So the first question I'm posing is, how can we crave being understood? Like, what's so important about being understood? How come we rarely feel understood? Since that's kind of the implication that Kottler is making here. And what are some of the benefits of trying to understand others? So not only do we want to be understood, but how might it benefit each of us if we try to understand other people more? So let's dive into the first question. What are some of the benefits and costs of being understood and not being understood? And maybe we can explore some evolutionary reasons as to why being understood helps us thrive and survive. So let's first go into some of the questions of being understood. Benefits. Community gives life meaning. This is a quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The world is so empty if one thinks only of mountains, rivers, and cities. But to know someone who thinks and feels with us, and who, though distant, is close to us in spirit, this makes the earth for us an inhabited garden. So Goethe is saying that there can be so many things in the world, but what really makes home home, or any place a beautiful garden, is really about who's there with you, who thinks and feels with us. And even though they might be really far away, if you know that you have somebody who truly understands you, then your time on this earth, our brief existence, can somehow feel so much more fulfilling than the emptiness of not having somebody like that in your life who really understands who you are. So what are some of the costs of not being understood? Loneliness as Inability to Communicate by Carl Jung, from his book Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. So Jung here is talking about how being understood is not just about having people around you and close to you. Like, you can live in a city, you can live in a house with a lot of people, and yet you could really still have nobody understand who you are. So it's really about being able to communicate those things about who you are, what you care about, what you think, how you feel, and feeling comfortable sharing those things, because Jung is kind of alluding to, from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. So if you hold certain opinions, thoughts, beliefs that your group or someone else, if it's a one-on-one basis, does not agree with, and you are withholding yourself, you are not actively communicating those things to the other people around you, then you are likely not to feel understood, and then you're going to feel really lonely. So not being understood leads to loneliness. And this kind of leads into this next question of what might be some evolutionary reasons that being understood is so important. If Kottler is arguing that human beings as a whole have this really intense craving to be understood, what might be some reasons that evolution programmed us to be that way? So the ancestral environment, being alone, meant that you were in danger. This is an idea from Johann Hari from the book Lost Connections. Now imagine if, on those savannas, you became separated from the group and were alone for a protracted period of time. It meant you were in terrible danger. So from an evolutionary standpoint, when we were hunter-gatherers, if you were by yourself and alone, you probably weren't going to survive for a very long time. Like, that was an existential threat, a physical threat, And so that connects with this other idea from the same author and book, that loneliness is, we experience loneliness as stress, like a physical attack. Here's the quote: "Feeling lonely, it turned out, caused your cortisol levels to absolutely soar, as much as some of the most disturbing things that can ever happen to you. Becoming acutely lonely," the experiment found, "was as stressful as experiencing a physical attack." So when we connect this idea of the ancestral environment and how we experience loneliness physically, like we're being attacked, in many ways that's evolution trying to kind of preempt us. Like, if we are in danger of being alone, then that physical threat will arrive. And so our mental physiological system has almost like attacked first, like feel that, simulate that physical attack in the emotional moment of feeling alone and not being understood, so that you're motivated to actually attempt to be alone, or attempt to be understood, so that you are not alone and therefore not at a threat of dying, essentially, from being separated from the group. So let's examine this question of how come we rarely feel understood? What gets in the way of us feeling understood, and what prevents us from understanding others? Listen to others to be listened to. This is an idea from Stuart Diamond from his book, Getting More. If you wonder why your child doesn't listen to you, think about whether you really listen to them. Part of the implication Stuart's making here is that when we feel like we're not understood by somebody else, it's oftentimes like we're also playing a role in this. That when I am not making an active attempt to understand you, then you likely will also not make an attempt to try to understand me. And then this becomes this vicious cycle where we're just not listening to each other. And part of the implication that Diamond's making here is, if I make an attempt to understand you, like truly listen and understand you, then you're likely to also be more likely to make an attempt to understand and listen to me. So let's take a look at some of the benefits of trying to understand others. Persuade others by caring. This is also by Stuart Diamond from his book, Getting More. When the other party realizes you care about their feelings, they will listen more, making them more persuadable. So if I seek out to understand your feelings, to listen to you more, that will lead to you being more likely to care about my feelings and to listen more to me. So it's actually mutually beneficial for us, assuming we care about building a relationship, or at least have some way that we can positively benefit each other, that there's benefit in each of us learning to care about each of our feelings, for me to learn to listen more to you. And that then builds this virtuous cycle of trust, understanding, and a feeling of community. May we try to understand others. This is by an idea by Dale Carnegie from his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. So Dale is partly assuming that for many of us, our default response when people act in a way that we don't approve of or we disagree with is that we condemn them, like we start to attack. And instead he's saying, maybe let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out what's motivating them. What are they feeling? What's going on behind the scenes? And instead of criticism, which leads oftentimes to a negative spiral that could potentially, in the worst case, lead to war and violence, he's arguing that if we try to understand the other person, we breed sympathy, tolerance, kindness, these emotions and ways to interact with other people that can hopefully lead to mutual benefit instead of mutual destruction. So going full circle, let's take a look at what we learned. We talked about why is it that we crave being understood? What are the benefits? And how community and a sense of closeness brings this richness to the world, where the emptiness of an entire landscape can be fulfilling the moment that you have someone close to you in life that understands you, and that feeling of being understood gives our lives meaning. We talked about how the costs of not being understood can really lead to loneliness, and that loneliness from an evolutionary standpoint is dangerous, that we've essentially been biologically programmed to simulate a sense of physical threat when we feel alone. And when we are not understood, we are in danger of being outcast by the group. And that there's significant benefits to being understood and being part of the group. We talked about how come we rarely feel understood, what gets in the way of us feeling understood, and that when we aren't really proactively listening and trying to understand other people, that they're also far less likely to try to listen and understand us. And we talked about some of the benefits of trying to understand others. When we persuade others that we care, when we show them that we care, then they are much more likely to care about us. Dale Carnegie also talked about a similar idea, that when we try to understand other people, we are breeding the type of emotions that can bring us together as a group, as opposed to when we try to criticize and we don't try to care and understand and listen to other people, then we are dividing us. And when we think about where the world is right now, our ability to learn to understand each other, to proactively put ourselves out there, to set an example for other people, to be proactive in listening, to try to understand others, to care about others, can make the difference between whether we as a human species thrive together or we as a species destroy each other. Our technology has evolved so quickly now that, we have nuclear weapons. We are likely in the near future, within the next few decades, to have AI that can replace most of the jobs that we know exist today. The wealth gap will probably continue to massively increase as technology enables massive scale for the owners of those technologies. We have massive polarization in our politics and in our governments, and we're at kind of a precipice in human history where, if we can figure out a way to understand each other, to truly listen and care about our fellow man, like in religious texts, treating each person as our brother or sister, if we can do that and learn to do that, then we can share this enormous wealth that is likely coming down the horizon. But if we aren't able to actually understand each other, to care about each other, to form empathetic bonds with our fellow human beings, then it's not unlikely that we can tear each other apart, and that force can destroy us as a species.